So what is this listening we're talking about? Like, how do I do that? I've got a feed, I've got people that I'm following, but they might not necessarily be talking about what I want to talk about. How do I start listening?
One place that we started was, just literally having Hootsuite set up and saying, okay, like let's listen to, we started with the most generic terms. We looked at wedding, we looked at brides, we looked at engaged, right? And we kind of quickly realized some of those words are too generic and you're getting too many ads and vendors. And some of them are probably a little bit too generic, but enough that if you spend a couple hours on a day, you can really dig through them and see what people are talking about. So, and those will lead you to other keywords that are probably better. So we learned that just engaged was a much better keyword for us to follow than engaged, because we were actually getting pretty much every girl who had gotten engaged was tweeting a picture of her ring. We could interact with those girls right away. One of the things that we talked about earlier was on one of these days where we're kind of going down a wormhole of a too generic word, we discovered a really crazy cool niche of customers that are military fiancés. These are the most hyper-engaged people on social media you will ever find. These girls are on every social media platform and they're talking about it constantly. And we kind of got right away why, because these girls are living on a military base, their fiancés are overseas, they Skype with them once a week and that's it, and their families don't understand why they can't just pick their wedding date because they're waiting for the military to give them their leave schedule, and it's like they've got cost constraints and place constraints and all kinds of crazy things that nobody else really gets except other military fiancés. So they talk to each other constantly, and it's like you can literally whisper into the military fiancé world, and it's like the biggest echo chamber you'll ever find. And so it's been really cool for us, and it's the kind of things where I think we were discussing earlier that you have to know your business, and this is where I've had this debate with investors heatedly that I ran all of our social media starting off, which seemed crazy because I run a whole company with a ton of employees, but I felt like there was nobody else who was going to be able to understand the soul of the company well enough to know what to do with those opportunities. So somebody who I hired from outside to do marketing probably wouldn't have really gotten into like spending an hour like reading the tweets of military fiancés. And so if you understand your business and you just kind of start using any of the tools like to listen, don't worry about having a strategy. Like you will, just give yourself some hours to spend doing that and let yourself go down the wormholes, and you'll start finding what people are talking about naturally.
That's totally relevant. We did a video just geared towards military wives also. Similar thinking when we were doing some of these Obama girl videos. We didn't want to do everything about the president, so we did one video which was because the Iraq-Afghanistan Veterans Association came to us and said, will you do a video in support of what we're doing? And so we kind of dug around. My background is from the ad agency world, and that's kind of what we did. We decided, let's make a video geared just for military wives to share, not knowing how much of a community it was, for them to share. So we got all these military wives to lip sync to a song, singing about how they're, like missing their husbands, but how much they love these guys and everything. And it really did well, and a lot of it was because it's like they didn't have any videos that were just for them. There's a lot of stuff that's about the military, but this was something they could all share with each other, which I think businesses can apply also, which is sort of like, what's the piece of content, whoever your audience is, if it's fashion buyers or people attending Fashion Week or whatever it is, like what's that piece of content that they've never had just for them that they're all going to share with each other, because nobody's done that. But I definitely agree with the military wife thing, and it was interesting for me because we didn't realize it, and then you just saw these forums where they were being shared, and it was just filled with people discussing it with each other. I didn't even know that existed military wife forums, let alone tens of thousands of members in them. So
You make a really good point there. I think that it's important to know what everybody else is saying. So like, if you're launching a brand or whatever, you want to know what your competitors are talking about constantly, because otherwise you're not going to know how to have a perspective that's sort of unique.
Also, hashtags are huge. I call them the atomic element of social. The only sites that hashtags aren't live on are Facebook and now Pinterest, though they used to be live on Pinterest. And Facebook is going to be making them live supposedly sometime this year, meaning that if you click on a hashtag on Facebook, you'll get all the conversations around that. And there's hashtags for everything. There's hashtags for things that aren't even things. I mean, it's just like, a lot of hashtags are used, you know, like ironically, the way that someone just jams a whole bunch of words together because they're, you know, as a nod toward a joke. But any topic there is, there's a hashtag around it. So you can really distill conversations happening across social by finding the right hashtags and really seeing who's talking about them. And once you see what's being talked about and who's talking about it, it gives you a much better idea of like where to go. I mean, Instagram, hashtags are everything on Instagram. I mean, there are photos on there that don't even have a caption, that just have like 4,000 hashtags. Everybody's seen it. I know you've all seen those photos where it's just like, there's like 5 screens worth of hashtags, and that's because they're just trying to tap into every single community. One of my friends made fun of me because I have a Siberian Husky, but you would not believe how many Siberian Husky related hashtags there are on Instagram. And so like one time I tried to find them all, and I was just like, well, I'm gonna hashtag them all, and my friends were like, what the hell is wrong with you? I was like, oh, sorry, I just want people to see my dog. And by the way, my dog is so much more popular than I am. It's unbelievable.
Amy, do you think there's any downside to that? You're like, I was wondering, is there some, like, from a branding perspective, like, if I see things that are so many hashtags, like, I'm less inclined to read it. More on Twitter than anything else.
Yeah, I think on Twitter there are people who are need to be in like a hashtag 12-step program. I think like for Instagram, since it's really about the image, like you can overlook that. I mean, people see it and think it's funny, but it's not. It doesn't have the same sort of effect. But on Twitter, totally. I mean, there are people where like every other word is hashtagged, and it's like, I can't read that. I don't even know what that tweet says because it's like every other word is in another color.
And it was kind of desperate. Like you're so clearly trying to get people to search for you or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's good to 2, maybe 3. I mean, 3, I would say, like, in extenuating circumstances, if there's, like, 2 specific ones.
Like, throw in a funny one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little different if one of them is, like, you know, if your third hashtag is, am I using too many hashtags? You know? So, you know, something like that. But, and it's not a rule. I mean, look, you go on Twitter, you'll see people using, like I said, just, like, tons of hashtags. And a lot of people do it, and maybe it works for them, and that's great. But I tend to believe in just in talking to people, both real people and social media people. So, but yeah, hashtags, you can totally overdo it, and it does just look weird, and it makes it difficult to read, and it does feel a little desperate.
And some of it's also, I mean, doing to the extent that you really are showing you understand what people are talking about versus just trying to spam and just be part of any conversation. So if there is a timely topic and everyone's using a hashtag or kind of galvanizing around a single hashtag, then yeah, you want what you share to be part of that and not just something that you're guessing at. People will find that of value. And then there's also something to be said that, like, a great example, not from a client, but Lowe's, for instance, just did this amazing program using Vine, the 6-second video app. And they did all these how-to videos in 6 seconds. It had a professional video producer who was behind it, like someone who did stuff for the Tribeca Film Festival, and they are fantastic. They were actually so good that I do no handiwork whatsoever, and I subscribe to the Lowe's newsletter because of it, because it's like, wow, if their content is this good, I need to get more of it. And so using a hashtag to group all this stuff together so that if you see one, you can go in and find the rest. There are things like that just for pure content organization, it's a big piece of it. And then getting to the listening, it seems like there are 2 kinds we're talking about, because one is listening to what everyone else is saying out there and figure out the best way to be part of it and contribute to it. And but then a lot of it is listening to yourself and having that ear to understand your own voice. I mean, one of the most valuable things we do with clients are these brand voice workshops. And we really do come up with things like, well, what kinds of celebrities or public figures would you want as part of that representation? Like, who do you sound like, and who do you want to sound like? What would be that ideal voice? And so then everyone's there in the room and then can start coming up with content and instantly know whether it's on brand or not on brand. Like, oh, you know what? Like, we're trying to be really Ellen, but this isn't happy. It isn't upbeat enough. This is actually a little too negative for us. So Ellen would never go negative. And then you could start thinking a bit like that. And it's amazing how things like that piece is part of the bigger story then help you listen to yourself and come up with something that's consistent and hopefully really relevant to what your audience is looking for.
That's a really
Yeah.
good point, because I think that most social media mishaps happen when someone makes a bad suggestion and someone like doesn't listen to their voice and doesn't speak up and say, well, what about X, Y, and Z? And there are always people who recognize those things, and it is important to listen to that voice, especially when you like know that it's something that you understand about.